आज मेरा ये व्याख्यान जो है एक मिक्स्ड लैंग्वेज में रहेगा। आई विल बी यूजिंग इंग्लिश एंड हिंदी। मेरा टॉपिक होगा भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था समसामयिक परिप्रेक्ष्य में क्या यह जो अर्थव्यवस्था का स्लो डाउन है ये एक टेम्प्रोरी फिनोमिनन है या स्ट्रक्चरल वीकनेस है या पॉलिसी रेमिफिकेशंस हैं। व्हाट इज़ दिस ऑल अबाउट? मेरा हमेशा ये मानना रहता है कि तथ्य को अच्छे तरीके से समझना, ऑब्जर्वेशनल रियलिज्म, एक ऑब्जर्वेशन की जो एक पैनापन है, जो उसकी तथ्यात्मकता है, उसको भी समझना और विषय को उसकी संपूर्ण परिवेश के सिलसिले में देख करके और जो हम एक अपना निष्कर्ष निकालते हैं, जो कंक्लूज़न डिराइव करते हैं, वो एक जो निष्कर्ष निकलता है वो समाज के लिए, देश के लिए और मानवता के लिए हमेशा एक ज्ञान पुंज का काम करता है, ज्ञान पूंजी का काम करता है। एंड एज एन इंटेलेक्चुअल इट इज़ आवर ड्यूटी, rather an obligation on us to analyze the things in their correct perspectives with utmost sincerity to the reality. As an intellectual, it is our job to know the truth. Investigation of truth, exposure of truth, investigation of the truth, exposure of the truth is one of the biggest obligation on an intellectual. An intellectual is not supposed to misguide the society. An intellectual is not supposed to push his own narratives or a person to rationalize anything or to demonize anything. That is not intellectualism. Campaign intellectualism is not intellectual merit. An intellectual is supposed to know the truth in its realistic perspective and try to analyze its causes, results, and contemporary dynamics. So, coming back again, if we compare our economy for last 4-5 years, maybe a decade old economy to current perspective, there are certain visible indicators which we can easily explain and we can easily understand as well. India is a society, Indian society is historically a believer in the cash mode of transaction, gold or cash. Unfortunately, the kind of economic ecosystem required to substitute cash was neither existent nor was provided due to vested interest. So cash was allowed to flourish, cash economic system, because it suited to everybody. First, doers of the business, because cash is hardly traceable, it has very lesser footprints. Secondly, it is easy to bribe the administration. So cash economy was actually suitable to the bureaucracy, doers of business, and all other parasitical arrangements which actually thrived on the cash economy. Who was the sufferer? Sufferers were two. One was the nation, other was the business culture. In the long run, no business can survive on wrong paths. By doing wrong things, you can succeed in one or two games, but not always. So, arrow of successfulness is not in wrongness. Anything to become successful has to adopt the path of sustainable truth. Unfortunately, the business in India flourished, especially after the British regime and maybe after the post independence regime, more or less on cash models. Unfortunately or fortunately, the government of India did not take it as a challenge. Whether doing the cash or withdrawals of the cash or paying the cash can be a dimension of corruption, a dimension of wrong business culture, and it was allowed to flourish, of course, under the patronage, and it was mutually beneficial to all. So, attacking of the cash economy, because creating wealth in terms of gold and cash, could we always free from any footprints of traceabilities? So anything I do cash or accumulate in cash could be without the knowledge of the government, and that could be a very self-supporting system. Cash increasing the cash, and sometimes cash converted into gold, because Indians are very obsessive about gold, which is actually a cash, and then the cash. Anybody, you can go in the market, and if you pay the cash, he will be most happy to take it rather than taking a check and draft. And unfortunately, check and drafts are certain instruments which have certain inherent problems. So cash became a model because business obligations, business assurances were not so much realistic and credible. So people either opted cash or something like that. So cash was always considered to be a very credible way of succeeding in business transactions. So, but it has certain other benefits, like the avoidance of the taxes because of leaving lesser footprints, and thus a kind of in India we always used to listen that Indian economy used to be called a parallel economy, where the black and white, black means cash and white means uh, accounted for economy, which has its registered footprints, which can be easily, traceable by the government department. So white and black used to be a very accepted phenomena of Indian economy, and it was also analyzed that in the early 70s, when the taxation per ratio gone very high, and that was one of the periods when cash started accumulating more and more, because high taxation rates actually increase tax avoidance, and so it is mutually supportive to each other. So Indian economy actually became obsessive of the cash because having a lot of inherent benefits. But how to handle that? All the bigger transactions, like having sale of property, buying of gold, smuggling, corruption, bribery, everything could be a possible source of consumption of the cash. So cash was actually a kind of boon for surviving in a very gray economic culture. So maybe the electoral corruptions, maybe the electoral bribing, maybe the buying of the tickets, selling of the tickets, and electoral expenses, and official corruption, and avoidance of the tax everywhere, and everything was actually converted into cash. And cash collection and cash accumulation became so high that we all are aware that there were bureaucrats who used to sleep on the beds full of wads of currencies. So, keeping cash collection, cash loans by the village silos, and a kind of totally unaccounted economy became the fashion because of bad taxation regimes and some sort of cultural, socio-cultural, economic relativities of Indian society. So this kind of economy, when it was attacked very wisely by through demonetization, it gave a dent. But the black economy needs much harsher dent. Anyway, so demonetization actually attacked on the cash culture of the economy to make it more accounted for the economy. So a business ecosystem which was mostly based on the cash flow, cash collection, cash accumulation, and cash transaction got a severe dent because of demonetization. And finally, business may be dented, but business will not wither away from India, because business in India is surviving because of a complete supporting ecosystem of demand, supply, and technology. We have a demographic dividend. We are a country full of natural resources. We are a country full of human resources. We are a country having the democracy. We are the country having a constitution. We are having a country with all kind of positive indicators which any economy needs. So what actually we want is that to create a kind of cultural ecosystem of doing business where people are encouraged to adopt the global culture of shifting towards electronic or paper accounted economy instead of just informal cash and so-called black economy. So it was with that intention to increase electronic payments, to increase white transactions, and to make economy white transaction oriented. The demonetization step was taken. How much it succeeded or not, it can be debated, but we cannot question the integrity of the decision and the intention of the decision. So it was a great leap forward to formalize the transaction mode of economy from cash and corruption to cashless and accounted for. So this has created some disruptions in the existing business culture, and that disruption will definitely take its own time to compensate, and shifting time to the new mode of transaction ecosystem. And it is changing very rapidly, and I'm sure that within few months it will take its usual path, An economy is not going to be derailed simply because it has shifted from cash to cashless modes, from unaccounted for to accounted for modes. Of course, once you join the system of accounted for mode of economy, your taxation liabilities increase, and of course, this is the fear of getting taxed. Actually, encouraged people to be more cash oriented, and once getting no option in the cash economy and getting a lot of incentivization to the cashless economy and being optionless will ultimately encourage or nudge people to join the race of white economy. So this shifting process would have adversely impacted the economic growth momentum, but it is a very transient, and soon it is going to recover from the shifting zones. Another thing I would like to see the paradigm shift in the Indian economy was the tax reforms like GST and all that. Actually, the GST taxation regime was a great leap forward to create a single taxation system for the whole country, and a lot of business transactions were actually very compartmentalized state to state, and this intra-state interstate transaction modes actually were paving the way of corruption, etc. But by incorporating GST regime, actually it has facilitated the taxpayers' liabilities, and it has created a kind of tax regime where those people who are willing to pay the taxes are very much in comfortable zones, because multiple taxations were amalgamated into one tax transactions, and then mobility of goods and services from one place, one state to other state, uh, which used to be infected with several problems of bordering of the states, etc., were removed, and now the India became inside a borderless state where goods and services will flow in a very unified tax regime, and then further decreasing the taxable income, and then rationalizing the tax ratios actually has decreased the total tax liabilities of the people, and has further nudged and will nudge always others to be tax compliant than tax avoidance. So GST was another disruptor in the usual business doing culture in India. So many more people who are not under the tax zones or tax regimes are either finding it difficult to avoid, and are finding it easier to be tax compliant, and this process has further improved the the business doing ecosystem, and the old system, which was not a tax compliant as well as having other aberrations, is shifting towards a new regime, and because of this there is definitely certain transitional problems and disruptions, so it can have a negative impact, and but it is in the short run. But in the long run, basic economic fundamentals are being okay. So the tax payers and business doing community is going to recover this disruption very smartly, and in fact then it will be a robust kind of system which will actually make more economic progress than earlier it was. So this is another disruption, positive disruption. Another thing which actually facilitated made disruptive policy innovation was the the demonetization and then the GST, and there was the creation of a kind of policy reforms where the government could easily make the interstate transaction and interstate development of the various economic activities by increasing the infrastructural investment. In fact, this is a positive development. In fact, this has nothing it is actually sustaining the slowdown and trying to recover from that. So it is a positive always. It's positive it is not disruption, it is a positive change. What actually another thing which actually created a temporary slowdown is the bad credit ecosystem. If we see, as per the government data till 2004, the total disbursement of loans, and from 2004 to 2014, if we compare the disbursement of loans, it's very mind-boggling. Around tens of lakhs, crores of loans were disbursed in this decade from 2004 to 14. I'm not blaming any time zone. My purpose is to say in India a culture was flourishing that was ironically was called telephone banking, where bank loans were given to influential people, or bank loans were given due to corruptions, which mostly converted into NPAs. So taking bad loans and then not using that money for doing business, but siphoning off that money to non-business activities, and then finally creating NPAs, finally affecting the capacity of loan providing capacities of the bank, because if the banks will create NPAs, then it is going to affect the lending capabilities of the banks, and lending to the needy is the need of hour. But unfortunately, because of successive NPA accumulations, banks were very, very stressed to offer lending, friendly lending to the needy people, especially to MSMEs and small creditors. And this tightening of the noose and tightening of the grip of the government to create a kind of rational landings with appropriate collaterals and all that, the credit flow in the society, credit flow in the economy has shrunk, and it has an adverse impact and maybe attributed to the slowdown. So again, this is a policy disruption, because earlier there were hardly any tight control on the bad loans of the public sector by the public sector banks, and there were a lot of issues of conniving with the banks by the bureaucrats, politicians, and corporate sectors to take loans on over invoiced situations or businesses or something like that. And actually they were not to create a business environment, business activity, but to actually loans were taken to siphon off the money of the loan, and then creating NPAs and litigating them, and finally getting out of the system of recoveries. Recently, the government has taken very stringent measures to lend money, And government has tried that let the banks, especially the government banks, should offer money to the small and medium class people liberally, because the NPAs are more from higher side, from the corporate side and other big lendees, not from the common man, middle class or poor, lower class. But unfortunately, the large chunk of the capital of the banks were shifted to the corporate and big people who were actually intentional NPA doing class, and on the cost of the common man, common businessman, who were actually the sincere, needy people of the bank money. But since the government has taken very stringent action, so the credit flow in the market has been little bit disrupted, and this could have some effect on the slowdown, because the way the credit flow should have been in the market is not there, because banks have become over conscious in lending. So that can be one factor of affecting the slowdown. But these three major factors affecting the growth of economy could have been worse had the government not taken certain basic steps to overcome the crisis. For example, massive emphasis by the government on ease of doing business, and then creating a stable and predictable economic system to encourage, incentivize foreign investors to come India, and then certain policy paradigms, narratives like Make in India, and then creating a robust image of the decisive governance, a powerful governance with regard to taking policy decisions boldly and effectively uh, to increase the business sentiments in the country, and then policy predictabilities and massive expenditure on infrastructure and improvement of the policy reforms, labor reforms, and then certain other factors encouraging the business activities like easing the environmental regulations to become growth oriented rather than negative environmental regulations, and the disinvestments of certain entities which used to be holders of the cash and capital, and then selling them off and creating a capital or liquidity in the hands of the government. And then most important this government has done is not increasing of the taxes. Taxes have been lowered and lowered. In fact, these all are policies which could have cumulatively uh, arrested the slowdown. Otherwise, because of these three factors which I have narrated earlier, the slowdown could have been more sloppy. But because of these policy directions, and then next mandate to the government and the faith of the people would have boosted the business doing activities, and especially the big investors internationally to take India seriously. And there are certain non-economic factors which could have positively increased the government's effort to arrest the economic slowdown, is the very strong image of the country in international forums, and many critical situation, crisis situations were so well handled by the foreign policy managers, which has created a kind of very very strong belief in the strong strength of Indian polity and Indian economy, because many critical decisions of the government were very much supported by superpowers, and the credibility of the Prime Minister of the country is so robust and impeccable, uh, and really internationally, and it has been proven by several researches and several publications that Mr. Modi is the most trusted political leader in the world. This makes a lot of difference. So these factors had certain impacts with regard to arresting the slowdown. But in the last, I would like to say that there's a beautiful statement: when train is to change the track from passenger to express, it speeds speed gets slowed down because it is now joining the bigger race. When any link road joins expressway, before joining the expressway, you have to slow down your speed. And then the moment you are on the expressway, your speed will automate you to join the speed of expressway. So in that perspective, I would like to say these slowdowns were actually positive policy disruptions, slowing the business doing activity without any loss of business fundamentals. So it is a business process disruption, not the business substance disruption. Substantial issues of the business are still existing and are same or maybe more robust, but business process disruption would have made certain negative impacts with regard to growth dynamics of the Indian economy. But soon Indian economy is going to take over these challenges and will actually speed up. And this is a momentary phase, and I'm sure that the fundamentals of the economy are very strong, and we are not going to be any way impeded by these procedural issues, and people will realize that actually being tax compliant, being procedure compliant, being credit compliant is actually in the interest of the business, because wrong practices in business are not going to be long lived. So wrong will not live long. This is the credo of the business, and this is a sustainable credo of any policy perspective. Any business doer must realize wrong has a short life, right has a long life, anywhere, everywhere, every time. Thank you very much.